Good to you.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
I am honored to call to order the November meeting of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start with our safety briefing. Lamar?
Walk around this way, please go around the way. That's of course right there. Thanks a lot for that. Thank you. Madam Chair, Executive Director, members of the board, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, it's a beautiful day today. All right, so let's start our safety briefing. We are located at 919 East Main Street. We're on the 4th floor in the Piedmont room. Restrooms, so women's restrooms. If you leave out the door here, make a couple lefts, they'll be on the left side. The men's restroom, make 2 rights, they'll be on the right side for restrooms. Assignments in case there's an emergency. 911, and please raise your hand when I call your name. 911, Mary Estelle Douglas. Thank you. Secondary, Michael Westerman. CPR, myself, Lamar Bates. Secondary, Joan from Finance. Being the first responders, Michael McLaughlin. Secondary, Steve Pitter. Thank you. The AED is at the security desk. We'll call security for that on the 2nd floor. The first aid kit is located on the table in the back wall if you need to use that. Stairwells and fire alarms are located near the restrooms. Fire extinguishers are near the women's restroom and also on the south end of the building near the Tidewater room. If we need to evacuate, there's one exit. So the way that we came in is the way that we will exit, that we'll leave out. If there's a fire alarm, we will use the stairwell, not the elevator, which you can't use anyway in case there's a fire alarm. We'll go to North Michael Capitol Square, where the George Washington statue is located. Ensure the person right down to your left and right is present when we get there. Safety and security. If you see something, say something, please. Call 911. You'll contact security as well. In case there's an active shooter, you'll either flee, hide, or fight. Flee, hide, fight. And for our virtual participants, be aware of phishing emails and scams, and know your medical emergencies and evacuation strategies. Do we have any questions? Happy holidays, and let's have a safe day. Thank you.
Thanks, Lamar.
Thank you, Lamar. We have a couple new board members today, including myself. So I'd love to start with a little bit of welcome. My name is Tiffany Robinson. I'm your new chair as the director of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. I am thrilled to be here. You probably have all read a little bit about my background, but to give you the very short version, I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I'm originally a Midwest girl. I came to college in Maryland in 1995. Stayed for law school, practiced in private practice for a while, doing a lot of land use and real estate transactional work. When my children were young, I moved into local county government, and then to state government, first in the Department of Housing and Community Development in Maryland as their housing finance agency director, and then into the governor's office. And then I ended my state career in Maryland as the labor secretary during a pandemic, which I don't recommend for anyone. But I was thrilled to transition to Richmond about a year and a half ago in the governor's office as a deputy chief of staff. And I got to work very closely with the transportation team because that was part of my portfolio there. And I'm thrilled to have transitioned into this role as director of DRPT. So thank you for having me as your chair. And I look forward to working with all of you. So I'd love to turn it over to Neil Crawford from Virginia Beach so that you can introduce yourself as well.
Sure, Robinson, thank you. And I'm honored to be a part of this very impressive group. My accent has already given me away from my next door neighbor. I'm from Eastern North Carolina, and I grew up on a farm as well. So we have that in common. But my career, I've been a long time banker, but my love and passion for transportation was being part of HR TAC as finance chair in Hampton Roads. So again, I'm honored to be here. Look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. I would also like to introduce Darian Flowers, another new board member from Arlington. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be with everyone again here and to join this group of, I think, as new board members, Virginians by choice. This is an exciting time to, serve the Commonwealth and do a lot of investing in our infrastructure. Professionally, transportation has kind of been the cornerstone of what I have done. I've served mostly in federal government, both in the U.S. Senate and also at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where I focus on, among other things, passenger rail issues. But now get to serve the Commonwealth in this capacity, and very excited to be here. I work for an ocean shipping company called MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company. We're the largest ocean shipping company in the world. So the idea of investing in infrastructure, both personally and professionally, is something that I'm very passionate about and excited to be here to work with all of you.
Thank you, Darian. So I will now move into one thing I wanted to mention was I look forward to getting to know all of you. And I know we have a box lunch coming up this afternoon. So I thought that during our lunch, we might do a little bit more of informal introductions around the room so everybody can tell a little bit about themselves and where they're from. But I won't take time with our agenda on that today. I would like to open it up for public comment. I don't believe we have anyone signed up. Just making sure. Do you have any last minute? So moving on to approval of the meeting minutes. I assume everyone's had a chance to review the August 27th, 2024 minutes. Yes, of course. Thank you, Mary Estelle. You can correct me all day long. We're going to take a roll call first to make sure we have a quorum.
Ms. Bushu? Here. Mr. Cardwell? Mr. Crawford?
Here.
Mr. Dalton?
Here.
Mr. Delandro? Ms. Dorsch? Here. Ms. Drake? Here. Mr. Flowers?
Here.
Mr. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Maestri? Ms. Moses Ned? Mr. Payne?
Here.
Mr. Reinhardt?
Here.
Mr. Watkins?
Here.
We did.
Thank you very much. Now I will take a motion to approve the August 27th, 2024 meeting minutes. So moved.
Second.
Moved. Second. Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Mary Estelle, would you call the roll?
Ms. Bushu?
Aye.
Mr. Cardwell? Mr. Crawford? Ms. Dorsch?
Aye.
Ms. Drake?
Aye.
Mr. Flowers? Mr. Jordan? Mr. Payne? Ms. Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Watkins?
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting minutes are approved. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Sadler for our Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone here. Lots of exciting news to report today, so we'll go through it. First and foremost, we released our second annual report, our 2024 annual report. You all got copies of that. You can also, the board material, actually click on it so it's available to the public. Good news just kind of continues to show that we're setting goals, aggressive goals, and how we're working to meet those goals. We continue to have a lot going on, as we'll talk about today, but we do think it's important to document and hold ourselves accountable each and every year. So thank you for your support on that. A number of you were at the Quantico Station ribbon cutting. This was a great example of partnership. I mean, VPRA did the work on the station, and VPRA, CSX did the work on that Arkandale project that added capacity. That ribbon cutting was 1st of November. Huge improvement for safety. Huge improvement for passenger experience, and most importantly, well, safety is most important, but just as important, more capacity. So when you have been going through the Quantico area, I am confident that you have at times sat behind a freight train. Adding that third track at Arkandale gives us the ability to go past the freight trains and is really the beginning of what we're looking to do up and down this corridor, is add capacity where needed to let the passenger trains run through. Another piece of exciting news, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly because Jeremy Latimer will be here this afternoon. Part of our Transforming Rail in Virginia deal with Amtrak was the development of customer service standards. And what that does is that we partner with Amtrak and say, you've got to have this level of on-time performance, the Wi-Fi has to work this often, the train needs to be at this level of cleanliness. We worked with them over the past 2.5 years to agree on those standards. We've now signed that agreement, and we have the ability to work together to hold Amtrak accountable for certain levels of service. We talk about the safety on the train, we talk about the reliability, but if people don't have a good experience, they're not going to come back. And so this is a big step for us, big step for Amtrak, candidly. It's the only agreement of its kind across the states that allows us to hold each other accountable for customer service standards. Very exciting. I know you don't see it on my face, but when Jeremy talks about it this afternoon, you'll really, I think, be pleased with how that worked out. And then finally, we briefed you all earlier this year. You approved our revised deal with Norfolk Southern to purchase the Manassas Line and Seminary Yard. We said that we would be closing on Seminary Yard and giving the Virginia Line back to Norfolk Southern by the end of the calendar year. We actually completed that on November 15th. So that is off our books, and that piece of the transaction is done. Another piece of great news. Yes, ma'am.
I think you did a ribbon cutting for Long Bridge North. Is that correct?
We did a groundbreaking. That's correct. It's not in there, but we did do a groundbreaking for Long Bridge North. That was in late October. We are starting the work. We'll have a briefing later on today about Long Bridge, about the work that's taken place and what's going in the future. That's another piece of good news. Yep, that's a great point. We also, since our last meeting, we had a ribbon cutting at the Newport News, the new Newport News station. We started the new service in August. Due to scheduling reasons, we cut the ribbon about 3 weeks later, so that was fine. But yeah, we've just a lot of positive movement forward. Thank you. Every month we update you either in the executive director report that we email out, or if we're in a board meeting here, on our AIP goals. We are in good shape on 3 out of 4, but the first one that I want to highlight is the one that we're struggling with. And the top one is our goal to increase ridership by 3% and to achieve cost recovery of 70%. We reported earlier at I believe the last board meeting that we were having some struggles with Amtrak, that the ticket fares were being set a little high. And so while our revenue was doing very, very well, the ridership was not doing as well. We worked with Amtrak. You can see in some of the trends that ridership was going up. But based on what we have so far, we're still not comfortable. We've got to continue to tweak some of those numbers, bring the fares down so we can have ridership up. It's a very complicated matrix because you set the fares, but you don't know if people aren't riding because the fares are too high, or because maybe over a very hot summer where we had a lot of delays in Union Station, had to do some capital improvements, maybe they were discouraged by poor on-time performance. It's possible the gas prices are so low that they'd rather drive. We just don't have a sense for all of the different variables. That said, it's something that we watch very closely. Steve and I talk about it, and I think Steve doesn't sleep at night because of it. But we continue to work with Amtrak to hopefully pick that up. You can see it says ridership is down 8.5%. But the good news is ridership's actually only down 5.5%, but we had projected a 3% increase. So we're off the goal by 8.5%. So the ridership's only, quote unquote, down 5.5%. Still not what we're looking for. We'll continue to work with Amtrak to get that balance a little more proper. And then the other 3 goals are milestones for Long Bridge, milestones for major projects, and then the key organizational goals. All of those are on track. Happy to answer any questions on any of them, but it's pretty consistent. All right, passenger service updates. I just talked about it. In Union Station, we had over the course of the last 18 months, a couple derailments right in the tunnel there as you go north into Union Station. Part of those conversations led Amtrak to move towards a pretty aggressive infrastructure improvement project there. It's a short-term improvement, but it's a lot of turnouts and switches that had to be replaced. In order to do that, we had to cancel some service over the weekend. And what we did is on these key weekends that you see here, where we had 2 trains going to Norfolk, 2 trains going to Roanoke, we canceled one of them and provided alternate transportation at times. It's not a great news story because you basically limit the number of trains your passengers have, but making this investment, canceling the service here, will really increase the reliability going forward. So we're watching the October ridership closely to see what the impact was. Obviously, with fewer trains, it's going to be a little bit down. But these infrastructure improvements that Amtrak completed, and to their credit, they gave us the window that they would be working, and they met that window. This is going to have pay huge dividends going forward with more reliability. Here's our ridership chart. This is the chart we show you every month. You see we're 4.2% down September over September. And as I quoted earlier, year over year, we're 5.5% down. We continue to see the same trend where the even though we're down, it's the second highest ridership ever. So we're still way above the pre-COVID ridership, which is fantastic. You can see left to right there, the biggest stations where people get on and off. I already talked about this. We continue to watch this very closely.
DJ,
Yes, ma'am.
could you back up a minute to the outages? Because I was curious, what happens to the rider? Are they know in advance not to take that train? Or you did say you had some alternate transportation. They must have been last minute. Or yeah, how does that work?
So actually, we knew about this pretty far in advance. We talked about this. We negotiated with Amtrak the weekends that these would take place. And when it was decided that these were the windows, October 18th and November 1st, we then went to our trains and said, so 3 trains go to Norfolk. We looked at them and said, okay, we're going to cancel one of them. And we called all the Amtrak, called or contacted all the riders on that one train that was being canceled. And we said, hey, due to track work, this train is being canceled. It's 2 months from now. There are 2 other trains that day that you can take. Please choose one of them. And if they,
So well in advance.
yeah, this wasn't a last minute thing. Yeah, this was well in advance. Here's the ridership route by route. It's pretty self-explanatory. The Norfolk route is the big one. In August, we really saw a pretty good dip, and then we went back to Amtrak and talked about the fares, and we thought in September we were getting closer. But repeating myself, we continue to work very closely because we want to see better ridership than this. I'm not going to go into detail on these. This just shows you the route by route information. We show this every month. Continue to see that freight train interference is a big deal as far as on-time performance is concerned. Part of what we're doing with all of our projects is to add the capacity so we won't have as much passenger freight train interference. We do, and we've warned folks before, as the next 4 or 5 years progress, we're going to be doing more and more construction, which will mean more slow orders and which will mean more delays. We are working with VPRA and we're working with Amtrak to modify schedules. So even though the trip time will be longer when there are construction gangs out there, passengers will expect that. So we would rather a trip that normally takes an hour, we'd rather change the schedule and have it be an hour and 15 minutes, but get the customer there when they expect to get there. You know, a longer ride with an on-time train is better than a late train. Here's the Washington Newport News. Pretty consistent story. As we've talked about before, pre-COVID, highest ridership was during the week. Post-COVID, we've been getting great weekend ridership, which is just an interesting shift in work and how they go to the office. Here are the 3 trains to Norfolk. On-time performance here is actually below 70, which we don't love at all. And then finally, here's the 1 trip Washington to Richmond. We had talked a couple meetings ago about how Virginia compares to other state-supported service. So we've started to include this chart in our monthly report. This shows the Virginia ridership as compared to Pennsylvania, as compared to New York, and as compared to North Carolina. You can see our line is the bluish line near the top. We do in most months better than other states. And when we're below other states, we're really close to the top. I do want to point out, though, if you look at the Keystone service, they run 26 trains. That's Pennsylvania. The Empire service in New York, they run 24 trains. Virginia, we only have 16 trains. We have 16 trains, not as many as the other states, but we have a lot of trains. The fact that we're having ridership at levels above theirs or close to theirs with fewer trains is just a testament to how we continue. You put trains in place, people are going to ride. And we'll continue to show this state comparison month by month. I think this is
That's a good chart. Thank you.
This is the idea of the board. It's actually annual cost recovery. Bad news for high fares is that your ridership goes down. The good news is that your revenue is doing really well. So our cost recovery is 75%. It's above our goal. But as I said earlier, we're really not happy with it because we want a better mix. And if you have a lot of riders, but you're not pulling in any money, that's bad. If you have a lot of money, but you're not pulling in riders, that's bad too. And we're not where we want to be there.
Jay, can I just ask a question on that? I probably asked this already, but I just think it must be a knowable fact, like where that sweet spot is, right, for fares and ridership numbers. We see it all the time. You know, on toll roads, they do extensive traffic and revenue studies. They say if you want to reach this, you need to toll at this rate, you'll get this many riders and this much revenue over the year. Are we looking into that, right? I mean, does Amtrak use that metric? I really think it's knowable to find the right spot for fares.
They do a lot of studies on that. They do a lot of research on that. Until recently, and I don't think Bruno's on, but until recently, they haven't been overly transparent with their findings, which is a challenge. We also struggle with the competition of their needs and our needs, candidly. We price here to Washington, for example. They have a lot more control over what goes north. And so we've got to help not only find that sweet spot in all of what you're talking about, but the sweet spot in their trains versus our trains. So we continue to get better, but we don't have all the information we need for that. All of the variables, I mean, gas prices and time of the year where the holidays fall. I mean, it's amazing when Thanksgiving is so late in November, how that shifts the travel habits. That said, Thanksgiving's been late November before, and so we've seen what's happened before, so it shouldn't be new. I mean, the calendar's been the same for years, and that's something that we continue to, I don't want to say fight Amtrak, we continue to partner with Amtrak to get more transparency and better information so we can make decisions that are more well-informed.
Okay, so part of it is getting information from Amtrak, and then part of it is kind of competing priorities between us and Amtrak on price setting. Okay, that's very helpful.
And as we said at the last meeting, last 6 months, last 8 months, Amtrak has been much more forthcoming with the data, which is great.
Thank you.
Progress. We are not as a relationship where we need to be, but we continue to get better.
Is that a change in personnel or a change in thought about VPRA?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there was an historic distrust and a historic, perhaps, not seeing the states as partners. And I think that mindset has shifted due to some folks on board and just different mindset. I also think very candidly the fact that there are there are a few states that are bringing a lot of money to the table. Virginia is leading the pack on that all of a sudden it's not Amtrak saying, hey, we've got the money, you work for us. They are starting to see more and more the benefit of partnering with states. I mean, Steve, anything I missed there?
All I was going to add, DJ, was that at one point about a year ago, we literally turned the computer on and let the computer do the pricing based on the capacity that was filled, and it was not the results we wanted at all. And so I just wanted to add, there is manual intervention at the Amtrak level on a daily basis. They're looking at the trains and how much they're full, and they're looking at timing of holidays with their peak travel days, and they're adjusting to try to maximize revenue and ridership. And so I'd love it if we ever got to the point of data where we could let AI just handle it. But today there was a lot of intervention, and there was an untimely death of a key member at Amtrak that did a lot of that manual intervention. And so we're working through now, with the replacement and making sure we're all on the same page. So that's a little bit maybe of what's happened. And like DJ said, I'm going to reiterate it. There's a lot of factors that go into this, that it just could be that gas got below $3 a gallon and people decided to drive. It could be that the service disruptions, that second trip, they decided to drive. And so there are things that are literally out of our control. I mean, I talked to DJ this morning about it'd be great if we could get Google Analytics or iPhone data to see when somebody goes from Richmond to DC and then get their information and say, why didn't you take the train? And so if every day there's 4,000 people making that trip, but we just aren't quite at that point of the level of data that we have access to.
Agree. And it could also be another factor is if you're down here, or if you're in Newport News or you're in Norfolk and you're going to DC, if you were driving a year ago, you would say, okay, I'm going to drive, but as soon as I get to Fredericksburg, I'm going to be stuck in traffic and I'd rather take the train. Well, now you've got the hot lanes, and the hot lanes are open from Fredericksburg, and it's a much more predictable ride. And if you've got 3 folks, there's no toll. That could be part of it too. And to your point about the data, we don't know that. We don't know how many people are jumping on that hot lane with their family in the car as opposed to taking the train.
DJ, has your 70% cost recovery goal been the same since day one, or does that?
We've inched up a little bit. So when we first started state-supported service back in 2009, the train to Lynchburg, which will always be the Lynchburg train, it actually made money. So our cost recovery was over 100%. And then as we moved forward, it was above 70 in the 80s. For some trains, it was actually in the 90s. COVID, as you can see, kicked it down. Those are the actual numbers that you see. When we first started at VPRA, we set the goal just in the high 60s, and we slowly inched the goal up as we've continued to make progress there.
Thank you.
Here's our operations budget. This is the chart you all see every month, excuse me. Kind of lays out the operating revenues, the train revenue, and the expenses for the trains, and then the other expenses. You can see there how the cost recovery is calculated. As we talked about earlier, it's 75% actual through the end of September. I can answer questions on any category there, but it's pretty straightforward, and we're actually pretty close to what we estimated at the start of the year. I'm going to turn it to Mike McLaughlin for capital project updates, although I've reserved the right to interrupt as he's going through.
Thanks, DJ. My neck's already starting to hurt a little bit, so I'm going to stand up here at the podium if that's okay. People on this side, that won't have to actually see a little bit better over here. So we send this out every month. If I stopped and went through every slide, we'd be here all day. If you have any questions on anything I move past, feel free to stop me. Pretty good peripheral vision. I should be able to see a hand raised, that nature.
Also, I promised Mike I'd interrupt. I didn't know it'd be this soon. Also, when we send it out every month, if you have questions, then feel free to call us or email us. I mean, you've all heard me say this dozens of times. No surprises. Any questions, we're happy to answer them. I mean, the monthly report is for you and for your benefit. Anything that it doesn't have that you want, we're happy to add.
Some things we've added. We mentioned that the slide comparing other states. I have some other slides that we've added because of feedback from board members. So I'm going to skip through some of these because we're going to have a conversation about Long Ridge. But I do want to point out one thing that might not be mentioned. That's as much about procurement as anything else. We are working with VPRA to obligate a $729 million grant that the governor, senators, and others were at last December to commemorate for us. We're working hard on that to get that done by the end of the year. By the end of the month, but likely by the end of the year. Long Ridge South, what I want to mention here is that VPRA did approve the NEPA reevaluation package. That's the environmental package. So a lot of these projects we got cleared environmentally through a record decision years ago. When you have a change in scope or a change maybe a few feet here and there right away, you need to reevaluate the NEPA decision. It's a much shorter process than a long for those who've been involved with records of decision EISs. But that's a key moment when you get that NEPA reevaluation cleared by the VPRA. Alexandria Ford Track. What I want to point out here is that this is one of our projects that's moving to construction soon. Draft issue for bid, IFP, if you will, were received by VPRA a few weeks back, and they're under review by us. So this will be a project that we will move forward with on procurement. Soon with CSX, there's going to be a slide that's going to show you all the different projects that we undertake for procurement. CSX undertakes. This is one of the projects that CSX is leading for design and construction. We're leading Long Ridge. You can see a project lead, CSXT, the project lead. So we work closely with them, and we're excited to put out the IFB soon. So we plan to go to construction next summer. Franklin and Springfield project, what I want to mention here, and again, I know if you have questions about what the projects are, Alexandria Ford Track, obviously you see the map. We're moving from north to south here. Franklin bypass, this is the bypass that we talked to some recent board members, gets the trains from the east side of the corridor, south of Franconia, to the west side, north of Franconia. This is moving forward. We are in discussions with our contractor on cost. This is one of those projects that you bid a contract, you select the contractor, like Long Ridge North, and you come back later on and you negotiate cost. So if we have questions about that, we can talk about it a little bit, but since we're in negotiations with the contractors, we don't want to let them too much know what we're thinking on that. So,
and let me point out, we negotiate costs, but we have an exit ramp. So we're not stuck with this contractor. If we can't come to terms on a cost, then we can go to another contractor. Additionally, we have our own independent cost estimator. And if the cost that this contractor is coming to us with is off by a certain percentage from what our independent cost estimator is, then there's no deal. So we have a lot of leverage here as we negotiate, and to their credit, they've been good partners to to come to the table and look at different options for delivering this efficiently. Part of the challenge as a contractor, and I can't believe I'm going to say this from the contractor side, is there are a lot of unknowns. This is a running railroad, and we don't have the opportunity to shut the railroad down and do this work. So the question is, I'm going to do this work as a contractor. Are there 5 trains a day? Are there 50 trains a day? What are my work windows going to be? And if I'm a bidder, I'm going to go in and say, I'm going to assume very, very small work windows and very, very large, ineffective time. We've been working with CSX. We've been working with these folks on the bypass and other projects to say, look, we've got to come up with a reasonable work window that CSX can be happy with, that they can promise, yes, you will have access to the track for this amount of time, but also a window that the contractor can say, we're comfortable taking this risk. Because at the end of the day, if they've got crews out there that they're paying for that aren't doing any work, that's on them. And if I were a contractor, I wouldn't want that either. So far, knock on wood, we've had a good balance of open, honest conversations to get us to a good price on this project and others.
And actually this month, so every month an executive director's report you receive, they can actually put a slide or two to show you what's going on out in the field. Tree clearing has happened. It's happened up and down the border, not just for Franconia area, but also for the Alabama area. Do want to point out that, so you see we're currently at 60% design, 90% design coming in a couple months. Shoe fly, in case you want to know what a shoe fly is, that's a temporary track. That's a common question. I think a couple board meetings ago, we did talk about it a little bit, but shoe fly is a temporary track that helps us build the projects faster. Because when you're one of our challenges is we're constructing where trains currently, and there's not much ability to move the tracks. In some locations like this, there is ability to have a temporary track. Can't always do that, but in this case, that's what a shoe fly track is. And Jeff, you're here. If I say anything wrong, let me know. He's nodding and agreeing with that. I want to point out that for a lot of these projects, both Long Bridge, we talked about in open and closed session later on about costs, and also Franconia bypass. The costs are coming in at a good time now because Steve and team are trying to build the budget that we're going to come back to you with in January. As the last point, we're going to come back to you with more information for our January budget, and I think mid to late January at the board meeting.
Mike, and who's the lead on this? VPRA?
So VPRA is the lead on the bypass. So in case calls are wise, we lead on projects that we're primarily going to use. The new Long Bridge project, the span over the Potomac, is one we're going to use. It's going to be on that west side. It's going to line up with stations at Lawn Farm, Crystal City, and Union Station. The bypass is a bypass structure that's built primarily for passenger trains. So that's a good rhyme or reason why we're leading this. Whereas CSX, next project, CSX is leading the third track on the ground that's also associated with the bypass, but they're leading the track on the ground. So this is the Franconia-Lorton third track project. As you can see, the 90% structures package was delivered to us. So when you get to 60, 90%, you're really far along in design, getting closer to construction. So a lot of these projects, when we first met with some of you 3-4 years ago, weren't even at 30%. So we've made a lot of progress over the past couple of years on these. Again, this is about a 6-mile third track in that Franconia area.
Let me steal this one if that's okay. So I just want to make sure we were going to go over this quickly, but I think it's important that we talk about it because there are new board members here. So the Potomac Shores Station is a station in Prince William. It's right in Potomac Shores neighborhood / development. It's a station that was promised a long time ago, and there have been multiple reasons why the station hasn't been built yet. We, VPRA, were approached, and VPRA is a big part of this. So Rich, if you disagree with anything, jump in. Although we've been well aligned with VPRA for sure. We were approached a couple of years ago. One of the big issues is when the developer first designed the station and designed with a very lowercase d, they didn't realize how much dirt had to move to put the station in place. And as they were looking to move the dirt, it was a lot of dirt, and it's railroad dirt, so you don't know environmentally whether it's clean or whether it's not clean. And it would cost them a lot of money to move the dirt to an approved disposal site, and that they were concerned that they didn't have the money for that. One of the things that you can do under the environmental regulations, Mr. Westerman, stop me when I'm wrong here, is you can move railroad dirt to other railroad property, and then there are no issues, and railroads do that all the time. Well, there's no property for that to be moved to close by. I mean, CSX has property, but it's not close enough. And there were a lot of machinations going on. The developer owns a lot that's contiguous to the right of way that we are purchasing, that we, VPRA, is purchasing from CSX. They came up with a proposal to gift us that lot And so we would have a lot that's contiguous to our property, our right of way. It would be railroad property, and therefore they could move this dirt to that property. We thought it was a reasonable idea. It adds to our footprint a little bit, but it's really not that significant of a piece of property that it wouldn't cost it that much to maintain, we didn't think. That said, the property that they're looking to gift us is the site of a former landfill, a DC dump, where for decades, DC brought trash down and dumped it. Now that's been capped off and it's been deemed to be clean, but there's still a future risk. And we brought this to the board a few meetings ago, and there were concerns like, hey, that's some risk that we don't really want to take, which makes perfect sense. We've worked with the developer, and the developer came up with an insurance policy that said, look, we'll hold you harmless for if there are any environmental issues. However, going back and forth with the developer, we never got to a place on that insurance policy where we were comfortable that our risks would be mitigated. So we've abandoned that idea. We no longer have any desire to take that plot of property from them. We're not going to accept this former DC dump. And instead, we're going to wait until we take official ownership of the CSX right-of-way that we're purchasing, and we're just going through the process of getting the deed recorded. CSX will not allow them to test the dirt now because CSX owns it and they don't want to know about the dirt. But when it becomes our ownership, they want to do construction, they can test the dirt, and assuming it's clean, which it's on a hill, there were never any trains up there. I mean, there's a very good chance it's clean. Assuming it's clean, they can start construction and move forward with the station. If it's not clean, then they can't start construction and they've got to figure out what to do with the dirt. But we have stepped away from the solution of taking this land, and instead, when we take ownership, we'll allow them to test the dirt up on that hill. Assuming it's clean, they can move it and go forward with their construction. So I know there were a lot of concerns around the table about that insurance policy. Again, we worked hard, and the developer has worked very hard in good faith to come up with an insurance arrangement that would protect us, but we just couldn't get to a place where we were comfortable. We've abandoned that idea. We're now going to wait till we take ownership in spring, and then they can test it and go forward if they see fit.
So what happens if it's not clean?
If it's not clean, then they will have to build the station, take it to a certified disposal location and pay that price.
Just do we think that hill might be the dump?
No, that hill's definitely not the dump. The dump's further down.
Wondering why it was a hill. Okay.
I mean, that said, it's been there a long time. We don't know what happened. But yeah, it's not the location of the DC dump. It's further north.
All right. So we have no role in this.
They're going to be building the station on land that.
Thank you.
Do we have any leverage to really force the developer to go ahead and identify a plan B, like a dump location? Do we have any leverage to push them to do that earlier?
Not a ton. Yeah, not a ton.
I do know that the county is trying to explore some options on that too.
Yeah, and look, everybody wants the station done, but we don't have a great deal of leverage there.
So DJ, this was a big bone of contention in the board meeting. I think it was in July when we were in Alexandria. So I just want to make sure I understand this. Where the station is being built, is that dirt contaminated?
We don't know.
It's not. We don't know.
We don't know.
But it's a hill, so it's not underneath track. It's up on a hill. So Mike, go ahead. You can show.
So this is looking east toward the Potomac. See the water, the blue out there? The station is going to be below. You can see that over here, the tracks, they're going to run below it. So they're going to build on the other side between the Potomac and that station house. That's to get your bearings. That's kind of looking east up the Potomac. DC would be that way. And Rich, if I have this wrong, I believe the platform's going to be on the other side of the tracks.
And the concern is where they're building the platform on the other side of the tracks. They didn't think they'd have to clear as much land there, but there are concerns that it's a big slope, and they've now been required to clear all of that land out. That's dirt that, again, it's up on the hill. It's not where tracks were. It has not been tested. CSX has not let us test it, let the developer test it. So we won't know until we take ownership of the land. And then the developer will start their construction process, which includes testing the land to see the dirt to see if they can move it to non-special location.
And curiously, why will CSX not let us test it? I know it's their land.
Liability.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know.
Okay.
That's a clear indication there may be liability.
No, I think I think that's just their procedure that they say about everything. And they don't like to stray from that, because if they stray from
If they've done any testing or disturbed the land, they're not
Yeah.
going to indemnify anybody.
So why would we take ownership prior to test with that not being tested?
Well, because we're buying the actual train track. So the right of way that we're buying is the track that we're going to be running our trains on. When we made that large purchase of the 400 plus miles, we didn't do any environmental testing there because it's intended to be used for railroad property. We won't be building parks or anything like
You have limited disturbance.
Just to be clear, the DC Duncan mentioned earlier, that wasn't part of our deal with CSX.
Nor will it be.
It was an offer that the developer was willing to swap with us. Sure. So we were not intending, board's been clear about how
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, summing it up, the board had pretty significant reservations about this potential solution. We tried to come up with a deal that would mitigate those concerns. We weren't able to do it, so we dropped that deal and we're going down a different path. The developers.
I live near here. If anybody wants to tour,
You do, DJ.
Wanna-
DJ.
show you around.
I would like
We
that.
built thousands of houses and residences and done lots of testing, and just the developer has been very slow on this.
Who is the developer?
The station community.
I'll also say that when this station is done, it's going to be a huge benefit to the community because there's a lot of traffic there. There are a lot of people there, especially as we're able to add the nighttime and weekend trains on VPRA. It's going to be a great thing for the
I
community.
should say huge revenue boost from that community alone. I mean, people have moved there because of the traffic.
It has not moved there because it's not open yet.
All the houses, it's like a package. They kind of
Just not clear. If the developer